now we have Peter Eckersall, professor of theater here at the Cogito Center CUNY. You actually also came with a suggestion to us for this play to us, and Melissa Wong, a student also here, and they will talk a bit about the play. Huzir Sulaiman couldn't be with us. I think he's working here, couldn't come, and if you have any questions, you can also ask. But let's first hear a bit more about the play. If you have time to stay and maybe then join in, somebody would be nice. But you don't have to, I know. We're going to get excited so much. Melissa, Peter?
Sure.
Yeah, they can stay behind you. They can or this side.
I am moderating, and I think Mark's going to join us.
Yes.
So we'll just be 2 seconds. Well, thank you everyone, and once again thank you to Mike and to the wonderful company of actors who gave the read of this play. I think it was so as Frank said, my name is Peter Eckersall and I'm the Professor of Asian Theatre at the Graduate Centre. I've joined the program this January, so actually I'm Australian, and formerly I worked at the University of Melbourne, but I've had a lot to do, I guess, over the years with Singaporean theatre. I've worked there several times as a performer in the past, and also we met Huzir in a project that was with Asian performing artists, where we were doing some play readings of Asian and Australian plays, and quite a big kind of trans-Asian exchange project several years ago. We met and we discussed the possibility of doing a reading of this play. So I think it was a very interesting play to bring into the pen context, because it addresses so many, I guess, complicated contemporary themes about our existence in the contemporary world, but also it's a very timely play, I think, in relation to some much more recent artistic production around the idea of the question of identity in a kind of technologically mediated world. And I'm sure you've seen films like and things like that that have kind of added to this this debate in very, very interesting ways. So my role here is to moderate, and I'll ask our 2 guests today, Melissa Wong, who's a PhD student in the Centre, working on a project that includes Singaporean theatre as well as some other theatres from the region. And your work today was fabulous. So I might begin by just asking you, as an American director, how did you feel, sorry, I'll rephrase the question. How was it to come to this kind of play that has perhaps a slightly sort of removed context from the American scene? How did you respond to the play?
Yeah, I think so we took 6 hours yesterday to work on the play, sort of for a first and only time as a company. And it was kind of a wild experience because, you know, as I said, Huzir wasn't here with us. We've been in contact with him over email. So sort of totally removed from the context of like what inspired him to write the play and what the spark was and how this fits into theater in Singapore. But you know, the experience for us working on the play yesterday was that it felt really resonant and sort of fascinating and thrilling and dangerous, because so much of what the play is grappling with, both in our relationship to technology and how we understand technology, and also just the human level of like who these people are and what they think they've gone through and how they're catching up to what they've been through, felt, you know, sort of totally recognizable to us. So we sort of had a fun process yesterday of just trying to like decode, you know, there's a way in which this play is set up a bit like a mystery play, and you, as are the characters, continually trying to sort of chip away at what the real truth is, what the history has been leading up to this moment in time, and then the question of what these people choose to do moving forward. But we were sort of on an archaeological dig yesterday trying to get to the bottom of what actually had happened before the play started.
It's a fabulous way of speaking about it, because I feel like the play is always changing our expectations. You know, we was reading the play, and I think, well, yeah, I understand what Huzir is doing here. He's doing something about technology and identity, but then it moves into another kind of space and it becomes something about information economies, and then it becomes something about the state of Singapore, and then it becomes something about the sense of the question of where does consciousness reside, and so on and so forth. And it keeps developing these narratives, and in a certain kind of way they just kind of collide and they come into juxtaposition, I think. And so I'm wondering, as a director, how did you find your through lines through the play? Did you have any idea for that, or did you just kind of throw it up in the air and say, well, we'll see what comes out of the reading?
I think it was maybe a little bit more of that one.
Yeah.
But I think a big question for us was trying to figure out what do people actually know starting at the beginning of the play, and that is they uncover sort of one potential truth, and as they crash into one another, why is what they talk about next the next thing that they talk about? What are they trying to grapple with next, and how are they choosing to make sense of it? Because part of it is about these people trying to figure out what happened, but so much of it seems to be about figuring out what is my relationship to what happened, and how do I process it, and how do I understand it, and why do I next choose to talk about sausages and the smell of the sausages and eating greasy meat in bed? Why is that the next memory that I go to? Or why is this the moment that I choose to talk about sort of my orphanage and losing my family in this plane crash? And how is this sort of the experience of my life and my concrete or my visceral understanding of my life? Why am I reaching out to the parts of that I am in this particular moment as this sort of fundamental truth of my identity is questioned or challenged in a new way? So I think that was as much as I think we were sort of able to start to figure out yesterday, and then a lot of it was just what could we open up?
Yeah, I think you did that very well. So, Melissa, just tell me a little bit about the writer and about where you see this play sitting in the Singaporean context.
I mean, I think Huzir is a very interesting writer. Actually, there's some Singaporean writers, or New York-based Singaporean writers in the audience as well, who might be able to speak even more to Huzir's work than I. But just to give a little bit of a background on Huzir Sulaiman, he's actually a Malaysian-born, Singapore-based writer. And I think this work was written in 2007, correct? What I see about Huzir's work is really interesting because he grapples different thematic concerns in all his plays. I interviewed him about 2 years ago, and he said what he really tries to do in every one of his plays is not to repeat himself and the concerns in the plays, right? And the thing about Huzir, I think, as you were listening to the play, you would realize that he really puts an onus on the importance of language, right? And how language manifests the psychology of the characters, right? I mean, and it's quite interesting also because if you think about it, he's a Singapore-based Malaysian writer, and clearly the play is set in the context of Singapore and globally as well. But it's not a play that only resonates in the local context. It's really interested in perhaps more universal issues. And I believe, Peter, you mentioned about how he might be termed a humanist. I don't know whether you agree with that still. And you know, the existential concerns, I think, in this play, I think it's quite interesting if you think about it. In some ways, it's interested in the politics of Singapore and what's happening in the region. But that's not at the forefront, I think, of how he writes the play. It's almost, he's interested in the politics of technology, what's happening in Singapore, but with a small p and not a big P. And really, he's more interested in what the characters are going through and using those characters to shed light on what's happening. So politics is kind of in the background, and really, the character development is in the foreground. I think that's what he tries to do, not just in this particular play, but I think it's a theme, it's a characteristic that resonates in a lot of his writing and other plays as well.
Yeah, my comment about him being a humanist came out of quite a lengthy discussion we had when we were doing the Asian Playwright series, and in the room he was very much a kind of defender of, I guess, theatrical modernity in the face of a lot of quite postmodern or experimental writers. And he was somebody who, and he's a quite a philosophical thinker, but and a very literate person. But I think he aspires to defend high culture in relation to popular culture, and he aspires to defend a certain kind of modernity, a theatrical modernity as a project. This is very ironic, given this particular play, which is somewhat postmodern in its structure. And I was going to say that the nature of the writing seems to change. I'd be interested in both of you responding to this, in the sense that we get images in the play that are suggestive of other contexts, cyborgine kind of images from manga or cinema, the references to consciousness and in the robotic, but also then we have at the other extreme these kind of poetic moments that are taken out of quoting Rumi or quoting other kinds of so-called high-class literature. So there is a series of citations in this play that make it a very interesting and perhaps quite difficult play to grapple with, because of the fact that it's, in a sense, shifting genres constantly. So would you agree with that in terms of its structure? Is it a very fragmented play? Is that a reflection of Singaporean politics or the Singaporean condition, if such a thing could be said to exist?
I think that's a dramaturgical question, and perhaps the director might be more, maybe more suited. I would answer it perhaps in another way. I wouldn't talk so much about the structure of the play, but rather some of the ideas that he's grappling with, which I find quite interesting. I don't think he gives us a direct answer of how he feels about the state of human existence or ethics. And in some ways, I don't think it's... I think he said this once in the interview we did together, that he doesn't want his characters to reflect his own personal opinions, right? So he's really trying to understand how the characters think independently and not have the characters be a message box for the writer, right? And in some ways it's interesting when you think about how he termed this play as Cogito, I think, therefore I am. But it's quite unclear, I think, where the play and the characters stand in the equation. For example, looking at the characters of the three Catherines, right? Does the mind exist without the body? Does the body exist without the mind? Or do they have to be together? And I think in all the different parts of the plays and in the way that the characters speak, there is no answer. I think this is something that he poses to the audience. I think that's one thing. And the second thing about language, since he's such a proponent of language in plays, like you said before, he's really trying to do something different, right? I think one of his main aims of writing in the region is that he wants to bring the importance of language again, right, into plays, as opposed to the devised theatre pieces that was happening regionally in the 1990s. And so, when you think about it, language is the tool from which you think, right? So definitely he privileges the thinking. So so I think, therefore I am is perhaps something that is present in his plays. But at the same time, the situating of a play itself is an embodied experience. Do you know what I mean? Yep. So there's that kind of tension, I think, in both the way that Huzir Sulaiman writes and works, and also which is embodied and manifested in the play, this question, right? The divide between mind and body, the differences between perhaps a devised play and perhaps what you call a fully written play that privileges the playwright. I hope I don't have the answer, but it's just some thoughts that I have.
Let's just take some questions from the floor then, shall we? We've got a couple of minutes, I think, another 5 or 8 minutes, I think.
I wonder, Melissa, if you can talk to the extent to which Huzir's work uses a Singaporean form of theatre for its dramatic impact, as opposed to its perhaps navel-gazing commentary impact.
Can you repeat the question?
Well, so Huzir's work, it works in a form that is very familiar in Singapore, the sort of fractured, language-based, monologue-based theater. But unlike many of the writers there, he does still tell a more dramatic, compelling story, and one that looks out to the world at large. I wonder if you can talk some more about how he fits into that aspect of the dramatic versus the post-dramatic theater in Singapore.
I don't know. I don't really know quite how to answer that question. Perhaps I think what he was talking about when he, when he tries to explain his plays, is that he doesn't just want to be a simplistic political mouthpiece, right? I think what he was doing was trying to react to what's happening in the 1990s, where a lot of the plays that were being written or devised privileged embodiment, but not necessarily language. That's one thing, and who could only speak. Or that could only speak to an extremely localized context and that could not travel. I think that's one of the things that he was trying to work against. And the third thing I think perhaps I would say is rather different from his, about his work is that he really privileges, and he said that he's not ashamed of it, that he really privileges a kind of perspective that wasn't being echoed in postmodern Singapore theatre, right? Which is the middle class intellectual perspective, right? And because he privileges that perspective, the type of characters he writes for, and of course the language that is being used, right, to manifest the thoughts of this specific class of people is quite different from what we were seeing in both Singapore theatre in the 1990s and early 2000s. I would argue even today, and in Malaysian theatre, right? And it's Malaysian, of course, when it
Very
comes
different
to
to
reacting
Malaysian theatre.
to that. Yeah.
And it's so funny because hearing the play is like being in the room with him.
Yes.
Though on the subject of privilege, I'm interested that you find his characters middle classes. I would say that in both this and his most recent work, The Weight of Silk and Shrunk Skin, they're yes, definitely upper class. They're so wealthy that they can live literally anywhere in the world, and the checklist of placemates in this and the other work in this dislocation that they feel from any kind of culture in their community. Because even the fact of his facility in language kind of feeds into this extremely privileged education that characters have clearly had, because most Singaporeans don't speak like that. Most Singaporeans haven't had the ability to travel so widely across the world. So I suppose my question is, in attaining this universality, this kind of humanist play that could resonate anywhere in the world, has he lost the specific? There's nothing particularly Singaporean about any of these characters.
Interesting. I think I'll answer the question in two parts. I think the first part is, I think when I meant middle class, I was also referring to his earlier plays, right, from the 1990s, the plays that were produced in Malaysia, the intellectual Malaysian middle class. But you're right, Jeremy, to say that his last two plays, 2007, Cogito, and 2011 or 2012, which is The Weight of Silk on Skin, is about, upper class. It's about upper class characters in that way. And I think the shift, perhaps, I can't speak for him, but I think it's also a reflection of the growing, perhaps, a class difference in that region, right? So now, in the past 10 years, there has been this proliferation, should I say, of extremely cosmopolitan, very mobile, rich citizens of the world that's based in Singapore. And this is, and these are the characters that's presented in Cogito. In regards to your second question, whether it's lost its Singapore specificity, I think that he's not so interested in the specifics of Singapore politics. I think he's using Singapore, where he is what he knows, as a background for thinking about perhaps more universal humanistic issues. For example, the idea of the Biopolis is, I would think it's based on, Singapore Biopolis, right? What's happening in Singapore. Of course, Singapore prides itself in being the center of biopolis technologies, pharmaceutical technologies in Singapore. So it's definitely based on what's happening in Singapore, questioning the ethics, of having a center like that in Singapore. But I think his concerns goes beyond the specifics of social and cultural politics.
Rephrase that question a little bit and ask Mike whether this play feels like it's a play that you've come across before. Does it feel specifically other than as in being a Singaporean play? And I imagine you haven't read many Singaporean
No, I mean, I don't know that I would know how to answer what a Singaporean play is, so I don't know that I could do. But
does it feel something that is known to you as a director, or is it something that you...
It does, yeah. I mean, much of it. I mean, I think there were all sorts of things that encountering them yesterday, we weren't sure whether or not there was a context for it that we weren't aware of, or if it was part of the sort of like the landscape of the future. So it feels like there are all sorts of jokes from the future littered throughout the piece as well that capitalize on like the potential of what might happen in the next 20 years. But no, it doesn't. It doesn't feel sort of like totally unfamiliar.
Strange.
Yeah.
It might be maybe a question also from the actors too, since you're
I mean,
how it felt.
I think one thing we weren't sure whether it was translated or not, or whether it was originally in English, and so that was something where we, when we began to realize that it was actually, this is the original language, that was sort of an interesting revelation. But then it all seemed to sort of fall into place. I mean, as far as being something that's unusual, no, I think it absolutely, does it seem American? Maybe not American, but it definitely feels current and it feels familiar.
What made you wonder why it was translated? Sorry.
There are some sort of like the mummies and the bloody, and we were like, well, is that British? Did a British person translate? Because we don't know, and then we found out, well, that's just the way that people talk in Singapore. So now we
I don't think they use fuck so many times.
I know it's a computer. Came through in one, but for some reason doesn't get such funny now.
Yeah, she doesn't say it once. Yeah.
No, it seems.
Is there one?
No, there's none.
Yeah.
It seems the more the class, the more the money, the more the swearing between the three captains. The one that's been yes.
We've got time for just one more question, and then we'll have to strike for the next play reading. But are there any more questions or comments? Yes.
I was interested in the identity and the challenge to that, and my identity and the personalization of identity, and that struggle that seemed to be a theme in the play, and it seemed particularly Western psychology in that thing. But I would like to know a little bit more about that in Singapore, or is that permeating across the idea of the myself versus the more universal self?
I don't think that's a particularly Singapore question. And especially in the references that he uses, right? Definitely. The characters of Katherine and Tony Szeto obviously are very highly educated. They quote Descartes, right? And I think therefore I am trying to think through that, the universality of that or not. So I wouldn't think it's a particularly Singaporean-based theme in any way. Yes?
I'm going to try to follow up on that.
Sure.
One of the interesting things about Singaporean theatre is how many of the current makers of Singaporean theatre went to the same university and studied law. And I wonder if you could talk about how that level of education and legal studies has impacted the current state of playmaking in Singapore.
Well, I mean, for one thing, Huzir is not educated in Singapore, right? He was educated in international school, he went to Princeton, so he was definitely US educated. And his parents are lawyers and academics, right? In terms of how, so it's a separate question from the play, perhaps. And if you think think about the National University of Singapore or even other universities in Singapore, it definitely comes from a post-colonial tradition, right? But I'm not so sure the exact question you're asking in terms of how it impacts the playwriting or how it impacts the kind of theme.
I guess what sparked the thought in my brain, who knows what my brain works the way it does, but it was the question of how the play was pursuing a more intellectual conception of citizenhood or selfhood, and if the relative high level of intellectualism in the makers of Singapore theatre, or the level of education of Singapore theatre, because we're not seeing people who went to junior colleges or who went to public versus private schools as much in theatre, if that might impact the content of the thinking that's happening from these plays.
I mean, I would say, based on what I know about Singapore theatre and people who are working in Singapore theatre, most of them are highly educated. Most of the prominent theatre practitioners, I would say, in the prominent theatre companies, have not just studied in Singapore, a lot of them have gone abroad. So they're really influenced by US education, MFAs in the UK, some of them worked abroad quite a few years before coming back, for example, Rise, even Necessary Stage. So I would say there isn't a particular way of working that's distinct, depends on the different theatre companies. There's of course also Chinese language theatre in Singapore, and that's completely, quite a different community as well. So I don't think there's one answer to that question. I think it's quite varied.
I think it's a really interesting question because it speaks to the complexity of culture in Singapore, which is quite diverse, and we unfortunately don't have time to go into that today because I'm going to now wrap up the session, but very much thank our two speakers and thank our great performers today.
Thank you so much.
And also
It was a very great reading. So thank you for being here. And I'm one of my best friends. His name is Katherine Lee. She's married to a guy whose name is Tony. She's been to Russia. He quotes Rumi because he's a poet. And she accuses him of being completely detached from understanding who she really is. And she questions her. And
you are the downloaded consciousness.
yeah, so this is one of the reasons why this play was so fascinating. But again, why we wanted it here. So thank you.
It's so wonderful to be here.